If you stand on a busy intersection in a major metropolis, say like London or Tokyo or New York,
Mhm.
and you just close your eyes for a second, there is a very specific, overwhelming rhythm to the chaos.
Oh, absolutely. It's sensory overload.
Right. You feel the physical rumble of the subway deep beneath the concrete. You hear the sudden violent screech of taxi brakes, sirens cutting through the heavy air. There's just this constant, relentless forward velocity.
Yeah, and for most of us, we just put on noise-canceling headphones to survive it, you know?
Exactly. But what if someone didn't want to escape that chaos?
Hmm.
What if a group of people took that exact urban panic, that friction, that sheer speed, and engineered it into a musical genre?
Well, that's exactly what we're looking at today.
Right, because today we are pulling apart a cultural column from Monumental Movement Records, MMR. It's titled Drum and Bass Impact, the Poetics of the City spun by speed and heavy bass.
And it is just a stunning piece of cultural analysis. I mean, the author puts forward this thesis that drum and bass isn't just a functional category of electronic dance music. It's actually biomimicry.
Biomimicry.
Yeah, it is quite literally the physical heartbeat of the modern city translated into audio frequencies.
Okay, let's unpack this, because whether you are a lifelong electronic music producer who knows exactly how to, like, tune a snare drum, or you're just someone fascinated by how an underground rebellion evolves into a global culture, this deep dive is going to map out the anatomy of a sound.
We're basically going to trace how a deeply chaotic, totally illegal street movement from early 90s London didn't just survive the digital age, but mutated into the fastest, most complex club music on the planet.
And to really understand that extreme velocity, we first have to look at the pressure cooker that forged it, right?
Oh, absolutely. We have to go back to London, roughly between 1990 and 1993. The source material refers to this era as the birth of jungle.
Jungle, right.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is why this specific collision of sounds happened in that specific geographical place. I mean, this wasn't cooked up in some high-end corporate studio.
No, not at all.
It was the direct result of a deeply multicultural, working-class urban environment just crashing into itself.
I always like to think of it like this. Imagine taking a Jamaican reggae sound system, a hip-hop DJ, and an underground rave, throwing them all into a blender and just hitting the absolute highest speed setting.
That is a perfect analogy. You had all these distinct sonic traditions sharing the exact same cramped urban geometry.
Right, because on one side you have that profound Black British influence, particularly the Jamaican sound system culture, which brings in the DNA of reggae and dub music.
Exactly. And, you know, the defining characteristic of that Jamaican sound system culture is the physical weight of the music.
The bass.
Oh, the massive bass. It's the deployment of these custom-built speaker boxes designed to push low-end frequencies that you don't just hear, but you actually feel in your sternum.
Yeah, it hits you physically.
It does. That was the anchor. But then that heavy, grounded culture collides with the hyperactive, white, working-class DIY spirit of the UK rave scene.
So you've got the acid house movement, you have the influx of American hip-hop, and it all just smashes together.
Right, but the thing is, they didn't have a mainstream outlet for this collision. I mean, BBC Radio 1 wasn't going to play a chaotic hybrid of reggae and acid house.
Definitely not. So the source points out they literally had to build their own infrastructure, which means pirate radio stations.
This is such a crucial piece of the puzzle. Stations like Rinse FM weren't just quirky alternative media. They were a massive logistical operation of civil disobedience.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you had kids breaking into the rooftops of brutalist high-rise apartment blocks in the dead of night.
Just to broadcast music.
Exactly. They were hooking up these illegal FM transmitters to the elevator power supplies and just broadcasting these rebellious frequencies across the London skyline. It was an entirely unofficial, unregulated media network.
That is wild.
Mm-hmm.
And the music they were broadcasting, this early jungle, was pushing boundaries purely through the limitations of the technology they had. The column highlights pioneers like Rebel MC, who goes by Congo Natty, anchoring the music in its reggae roots, and groups like Shut Up and Dance, bridging the gap from hip-hop. But to understand the actual sound they were making, we have to talk about the engineering behind the speed.
The tempo.
Right, the tempo of this music sits between 160 and 180 beats per minute.
Which is just an incredibly hostile tempo. I mean, 180 BPM is quite literally the heart rate of a human being experiencing extreme adrenaline or sheer panic.
So the music is actually mimicking physiological city stress.
It really is. But how did they get there? Because in the early 90s, they weren't just programming synthetic drum machines to play that fast.
No, they were sampling old funk records. I mean, most famously, the A-Man Break, which is this 6-second drum solo from a 1969 track by the Winstons.
And this is where the socioeconomic reality dictates the art form. These producers were using early, relatively cheap digital hardware samplers like the Akai S950.
Which didn't have much memory, right?
Oh, almost none. Sometimes just a few seconds of recording time. So to fit a whole drum break into the sampler, producers would physically speed up the vinyl record on the turntable before recording it in.
Oh, right. And when you speed up a record, you don't just change the tempo, you pitch everything up.
Precisely. The physics of the medium meant that as the tempo increased to 160 or 170 BPM, the pitch of the drums shifted upward.
So the kick drums lose their low-end thump.
Yeah, and the snare drums turned into these high-pitched, frantic, cracking sounds. The cymbals started sounding like hissing steam. It created this incredibly nervous, skittering energy.
But they didn't just let that sped-up drum loop play normally. I mean, the MMR text calls their approach the aesthetics of deconstruction.
They completely shattered it.
Right. They took this drum sample, chopped it into microscopic digital fragments, and rearranged those fragments into stuttering, impossible patterns that a human drummer could never physically play.
It's basically the musical equivalent of cubism. They took a linear groove, broke it into pieces, and reassembled it to show you every angle at once.
But that frantic, high-pitched percussion left a massive empty space in the lower frequencies.
And that is exactly where that Jamaican sound system influence steps in to fill the void. They took a pure sine wave tone, just a massive sub-bass, and laid it underneath the chaos to anchor the track.
I look at the architecture of this music like a massive skyscraper.
Yeah.
The sub-bass is that deep, concrete foundation poured into the bedrock. It absorbs the seismic shock. It holds the entire structure in place.
I love that visual.
Thanks. And then, thousands of feet up in the air, you have the high-speed, chopped-up drum breaks. That's the glass and steel swaying frantically in the wind. Without the concrete foundation, the glass shatters.
And without the glass, you just have a slab of concrete. That tension between those two elements defined the jungle era from roughly 1990 to 1993.
But the column notes a distinct evolutionary shift between 1994 and 1997. The terminology changes.
Right, the scene stops calling it jungle and starts calling it drum and bass.
Wait, I have to challenge this narrative a bit. The source claims this shift happened because production technology improved, the sound design got cleaner, and the genre matured into something more refined.
Yeah, that's the general consensus.
But you're telling me a genre built by kids breaking into high-rises to set up illegal roof transmitters just smoothly transitioned into a refined high art form without a massive chunk of the underground crying sellout? I mean, doesn't polishing a street-level movement usually kill the very soul that made it interesting?
It's a completely valid skepticism, and frankly, it is the exact trap that kills like 90% of underground genres. They get polished, they get licensed for car commercials, and they just die.
Exactly.
But the MMR column argues that drum and bass survived because the polish wasn't used to make the music more accessible or generic. The improved technology was used to make the music computationally deeper and vastly more complex.
So they didn't compromise the speed or the way, they just got better at controlling the frequencies.
Exactly. As studio software evolved, producers could surgically carve out specific EQ frequencies. If you have a cleaner mix, you can introduce entirely new elements without the track turning to mud.
Ah.
The text points to LTJ Bucum, who pioneered a sound called intelligent drum and bass. Because he had better control over the sonic space, he could layer sweeping, cinematic synthesizers and ambient textures over those frantic 160 BPM breaks.
Which completely changes the context of the music. It's no longer just a weaponized sound designed to make people sweat in an illegal warehouse at 3 a.m. It becomes headphone music. You can sit on a train and actually listen to the compositional narrative.
And no one proved that concept more definitively than Goldie. He founded Metalheads, a label the text describes as the absolute hub for depth and intelligence in the genre.
Oh, Metalheads is legendary.
Yeah, and Goldie released an album called Timeless, which featured these sweeping 20-minute compositions, orchestral arrangements, and profound emotional arcs. It forced the mainstream music press to treat drum and bass not as a disposable club fad, but as serious, long-form art.
But I feel like the ultimate flex, the moment that proves your point about it not selling out, has to be Roni Size and his collective Represent.
Oh, absolutely.
They released an album called New Forms, and it won the Mercury Prize in the UK. They beat out massive, heavily funded mainstream rock and pop acts for the most prestigious artistic award in the country.
It was a massive deal.
And they did it by solving an insane engineering problem. How do you integrate a live acoustic jazz ensemble with 180 BPM computerized drum breaks?
To do that, you really have to understand the mechanics of syncopation.
Right.
Syncopation is when you deliberately place accents and emphasis on the offbeats, the unexpected empty spaces between the steady pulse of a metronome.
Jazz is entirely built on syncopation.
Exactly. And drum and bass is entirely built on syncopation. Roni Size realized they were speaking the exact same rhythmic language, just at different speeds.
That is so smart.
By hollowing out the mid-range frequencies of his electronic tracks, he created a physical pocket for an acoustic upright bass and a live drummer to perform inside of.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because once producers realized they could manipulate this architecture, that concrete foundation of bass and that glass and steel lattice of drums, they started building entirely different types of structures.
The evolutionary branches.
Yes. The genre fractured into these radically different subgenres, not as a marketing gimmick, but as different emotional responses to city life.
The source material outlines this beautifully. Let's look at how the environment shaped the sound. If you are experiencing the claustrophobic industrial grind of a city, the gray concrete, the exhaust, the sheer mechanical hostility, you get a subgenre called tech step, which eventually mutated into neurofunk.
Neurofunk.
Yeah.
I mean, the name alone sounds like a cybernetic implant.
It really does. And the sound is deeply technical and nervous. The column highlights producers like Ed Rush and Optical, and later a trio called Noisia, who possessed what the text calls God-level production skills.
God level.
Yeah, and the defining mechanic of neurofunk is how they manipulate the bass. They use something called an LFO, a low-frequency oscillator.
So what does that actually do to the sound?
Well, instead of a bass line just playing a flat, static note, an LFO automatically modulates the filter or the volume of that note at a specific speed.
Okay.
It creates a rhythmic, sweeping motion. It makes the bass literally sound like it is growling, tearing, or twisting back on itself. It gives the illusion that the synthesizer is a living, breathing, predatory machine. It's an incredibly aggressive, dystopian aesthetic.
Wow. But the city isn't always a dystopian nightmare, right? I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes you step out of a club at 6 a.m., the streets are empty, the sun is just starting to hit the glass buildings, and there is this beautiful, melancholic peace.
Yes.
And the architectural response to that feeling is a subgenre called liquid funk.
The contrast is staggering. Liquid funk takes that same 170 BPM chassis, but it strips away all the aggression. It relies heavily on sampling vintage soul vocals, lush Fender Rhodes pianos, and warm, rolling bass lines.
The label Hospital Records, run by London Electricity, became a massive hub for this, right?
Exactly. Artists like High Contrast or Caliber mastered the art of making 170 BPM feel entirely relaxed. It proves that velocity doesn't always have to equal anxiety. Sometimes velocity just feels like gliding.
I love that. And, if you don't want to analyze the architecture at all, if you just want to let off steam in a crowded room, you have Jump Up.
Oh, yeah. The party sound.
It strips away all the atmospheric pretension and focuses entirely on the dance floor physics. You have artists like DJ Hazard creating these ridiculously catchy, bouncy bass lines that are engineered purely for kinetic energy.
And the evolutionary tree even crosses paths with other tempos entirely. The text brings up drum step, which was championed by artists like Excision. Drum step utilizes a mechanic called the halftime beat.
Which is just a brilliant auditory illusion.
It really is. The song is still technically playing at 170 beats per minute, but instead of the snare drum hitting twice every bar, the producer programs the snare to hit only once, on the third beat.
So it tricks you.
Yeah, your brain latches onto that snare drum to determine the speed of the song. So even though the underlying grid is flying by at 170 BPM, the groove feels like it's dragging at a sluggish, incredibly heavy 85 BPM.
That's wild. It allows for this massive, stomping, dubstep-influenced weight without actually losing the underlying drum and bass tempo.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? We have this hyper-specific sound born out of illegal radio transmitters in 1990s London, utilizing pitch-shifted funk samples and hardware limitations.
Yeah.
Why does that aesthetic, the nylon sportswear, the graffiti-influenced tracksuits, the sci-fi cyberpunk visual art, why does that resonate so deeply with a teenager in Tokyo, or a skater in Los Angeles, or a producer in the Netherlands? How does an underground London pirate culture translate globally?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we arrive at the core argument of the MMR column. The author asserts that drum and bass became a global phenomenon because the psychological experience of urban compression is universal. A crowded, delayed subway train in Tokyo generates the exact same underlying physiological tension as a crowded, delayed tube train in London.
The geography changes, but the anxiety is identical.
Precisely. The extreme speed and that resonant physical bass perfectly mirror the relentless velocity of living in a modern metropolis. The column describes drum and bass as a rhythm of resistance.
A rhythm of resistance, that's powerful.
It is. In massive urban centers where people are increasingly isolated, staring at screens, and divided by class or socioeconomics, this music demands physical presence. It gathers thousands of people into a dark room and subjects them to the exact same low-frequency physical vibration. It forces a shared unifying experience.
And it refuses to become a museum piece. It is still actively mutating today. The source points to modern sonic alchemists like Alex Perez, who is constantly dissolving the boundaries between classic drum and bass, dub, and halftime.
Yeah, the experimentation never stopped.
You have provocateurs like Aaron Spector, who take the drum and bass foundation and violently smash it into hardcore punk rock, proving the tempo can handle almost any level of aggression.
Completely.
And simultaneously, acts like Subfocus or Wilkinson act as massive ambassadors, wrapping that underground speed in huge, accessible pop vocal melodies and pulling hundreds of thousands of new listeners into the ecosystem.
It is a perfect feedback loop. The city shapes the music, and then the music provides the soundtrack for the people surviving the city.
It's an unbelievable trajectory.
Yeah.
We started with a chaotic, multicultural collision of Jamaican sound systems, hip-hop, and acid house, broadcast illegally from the roofs of London high-rises.
Yeah.
And through sheer technological ingenuity, chopping samples, carving frequencies, and pushing hardware to its absolute breaking point, it evolved into a 180 BPM global foundation of bass music.
It's incredible when you lay it all out like that.
It fractures into neurofunk, liquid, and drum step, but always maintains that core DNA. It literally captures the physiological sensation of navigating a modern metropolis.
You know, this raises an important question, and it's a thought I'd really like to leave you with today.
Okay, let's hear it.
If drum and bass was the perfect chaotic hybrid born from the physical, multicultural friction of 1990s London, what completely new, unimaginable hybrid genres are being born right now?
Oh.
Not in physical cities, but in the hyper-connected digital megacities of the modern internet. When a producer in Lagos, a vocalist in Seoul, and a sound designer in Berlin can collide at light speed in a shared digital workspace, what does the new heartbeat of the city sound like?
The pirate radio transmitters of today aren't on rooftops, they are in the cloud. That is a brilliant thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure.
Before you dive back into the chaos of your own day, we highly recommend you track down some drum and bass. Find a classic sweeping track from Goldie or some tearing neurofunk from Noisia. Put on the best headphones you own, turn the volume up just a little past where you normally would, and see if you can feel that concrete foundation and that high-speed glass for yourself. Until next time.